These are Tsogo figures, and these struck me right away as interesting because of the very infant-like quality of the one on the left. We see those distended bellies like infants have on many of the Fong sculptures and on these. The mouth open and blowing air is referring to the story of the original creation because, like our Bible in the West, the Central Africans associate breath with life, and when your breath leaves you, life is over. So the air coming out of their mouth is associated with the original creation because it was considered that the Supreme Creator breathed life into the world. And we see this kind of mouth blowing air up in the grasslands as well. Birth in the Tsogo Bwiti rituals is really a central metaphor for what's happening as someone is initiated. For among the Tsogo, initiate will sit inside the hut or the male structure, communal structure, called the abanja, and they will ingest a hallucinogenic drug called iboga. And that is what allows them to transfer themselves out of this world and into the other world and become an expert at talking with the ancestors and the nature spirits in the other world. This drug has been brought to the U.S. and it's called ibogaine, and we use it to get people off of heroin, like we use methadone. It's a very powerful hallucinogenic drug. And that may be part of why this form of bwiti has spread very far, in very wide range in Central Africa is because of the use of this plant. So when you're inside the abanja and you're having this initiation ceremony done, they put a pole out in front of the hut, a very tall pole, and they draw two lines in red and white coming from the pole to the inside. The pole is the original pole by which the pygmies descended to earth, and the line is the umbilical cord in red and black, red and white. White is the color of the ancestors, as we've heard, and red is the color of transition. When the person who's staring at a bwiti figure has found, when people have determined that the hallucinogen has worked and they have entered the other word, they will efface that line to show a rupture of the umbilical cord and that they have fully entered into the other world. And after they come off that hallucinogenic experience, they are reborn. They are literally have been reborn into a new person through this ceremony. So we see this kind of metaphor of birth used in a lot of really interesting and actually I find very beautiful ways. And I wanted to just go through towards the end here maybe. I've got a little bit more to do, but a history of how this developed and changes this very foundational society for Central Africans in Gabon specifically, how it changes through time. When we are trying to reconstruct the history of these types of institutions, we have to use a lot of observations by outsiders made over the past 300-400 years. So some very interesting descriptions come out of I've only got them from the past 200 years. But here's some examples. The explorer Paul Duchaillu was one of the earliest guys to go into Gabon. He was there in 1868. And he saw bwiti figures that were in the form of a feminine stature, and he considered the statues very vulgar and indecent. But he said that bwiti is the saint patron of the country, which means a female patron saint of the country, again, associating this territoriality and the association of the sacredness of the nature and nature spirits. The American missionary Nassau in 1904 made a direct connection with some of what I'm saying, where he says Ombwiri, which is the name of this bwiti on the coast. Ombwiri spirits are similar to ancestors in that they are often the abandoned ancestors' spirits of people who once occupied the land another people now occupy. So that's like 1904 where he's captured that reality of why they're called ancestral, but they're the ancestors of the first comers, not of your own named lineage. And then Ephraim Anderson in 1950s was gathered a lot of information. I got a lot of ethnographic data about bwiti from his work. And he described bwiti as a powerful nature spirit, a culture hero, the prince of the earth who presides over the earth the way Anyambe, the supreme creator, is in charge of the sky. So when these people are, when Christianity comes, they have to deal with this duality of having the idea of a spirit in the earth and a spirit in the sky that are both beneficent. And there's a lot of struggling with this kind of melding of the two ideas. But let's go back in time just a little, and I'm going to talk to you about the origins of this and what we know from, the original word was yiti, and it's yit, to call, and the I added on the end makes what linguists call it agentive, so it adds an agent. So the word would have been the one who calls, the spirit who's calling. And it was abstract. We know it's an abstract conceptualization because they put this prefix bu, which is used for very abstract ideas. And we do get the sense from the way they talk about it. There's 6 or 7 groups where this word shows up in its original form, and I'm grabbing ethnography from there. The Congolese are some of them, the Togo, and then there's these people in northern Gabon that were kind of pushed out of the way by the Fong, and they're in very small remnant groups called the Kele, where you can see this too. So they were of a benevolent nature, and they, again, are represented as dwarf-like or short-statured. Here's where we get really interesting, because apparently, well, oral traditions say that the people on the coast learned of Bwiti from the Tsogo, and the Tsogo were being brought to them as slaves. And because of the way they pronounce things in their language, they changed it to Bwiri. But what it is they've put a prefix on their om, and the prefix is for a person, for a human. So they've personified this spirit, and it's not so abstract anymore. And at the coast, it becomes ombwiri, and it's very much associated with water, and I theorize that's because at the coast, people are getting their power through association with the ocean, with the wealth coming in due to the Atlantic slave trade. We see many myths change from rivers to ocean at this time, oral traditions. And the thing that's interesting here is it becomes useful because people are leaving all the time to go to the interior, unfortunately, to gather captives and to do trade. And so men are very anxious. And the society, I postulate this is when a mask becomes associated with it. The mask is why we have the personification. It becomes a spirit who enters the village. And in this context, the masked spirit punishes men and women, or punishes women and children who do not behave appropriately, meaning the wife's having an affair or doing something inappropriate while the husband's gone. This aspect of Bwiti is very, very important during the slave trade of controlling women and children and trying to keep control over society.